Please join me in welcoming Nadia Rouchdy, who is the head of climate at Emirates Nature-WWF. A very warm welcome.
Thank you, Laura, and thank you for the organizers for hosting me here today. We're here because we're excited to talk about our collaborative platform leading towards commercial decarbonization in the UAE. As Laura mentioned, this is an initiative that we launched at COP28, so very recently, but has been really instrumental, I think, in gathering commercial sector players and private sector together to understand how electrification and electric vehicles can play an important role in their decarbonization strategies. I'll start a little bit in just talking about who we are as an organization. I hope this is what I should use. It is. We represent Emirates Nature-WWF, the Worldwide Fund for Nature's UAE branch, and essentially we are concerned and participating in driving positive change on sustainability, climate action, but also on conservation and habitat protection. We've been an NGO in this country for the last 23 years, and we've been really successful in launching projects that really enable collaborative platforms and change across volunteering initiatives, policy, and more. We work across key pillars of work, which are nature and wildlife. Oh, this slide is not looking very nice, actually. Climate action, green recovery, food and water security, and volunteer and citizen science. Today, we'll be talking about one of the key flagship projects of the climate action pillar that we have, which is the UAE Alliance for Climate Action. The UAE Alliance for Climate Action was actually launched at COP27, again, as a collaborative platform to drive down decarbonization in non-state actors. Back in 2022, decarbonization wasn't understood how it was today. Net zero targets was not understood how it was today. And there was a real need to drive accelerated action in the UAE on science-based targets or Paris-aligned targets in organizations. And what do I mean by that is ensuring that organizations and non-state actors are reducing their emissions in line with what is needed to meet the temperature threshold as directed by the Paris Agreement of 1.5 degrees. And so we launched this at COP27 with the intention of rallying stakeholders in the UAE with a very specific objective of decarbonizing. And since then, we've been really successful in going from 7 stakeholders and non-state actors as a part of the alliance to over 50, with endorsement from the Ministry of Climate Change to help them support their journey on the Climate Responsible Pledge, and also gathering like-minded organizations to ensure that there's a whole-of-society approach and making sure that there's no duplication. So really engaging organizations like the Clean Energy Business Council, which I'm sure many of you know or are part of, engaging with knowledge partners like BCG, but also being an accelerator to Race to Zero. We're also part of the Global Alliances for Climate Action, which are spearheaded by WWF International, CDP, C40 Cities, and other. Essentially with the objective of really pooling together non-state actors and barreling them up to help enhance existing NDCs and allow for the government to also have more confidence in setting stronger targets because of this groundswell of non-state actors and decarbonization. So essentially, UACA's role is really convening stakeholders with the mission of really helping organizations individually in their path, but also helping UAE as a whole collaborate to have a stronger enabling policy environment for decarbonization. And this is essentially where Road to Zero came. Road to Zero was initiated towards the end of last year, after having heard from members saying, we are struggling with decarbonizing our Scope 3 emissions. And if raise of hands, who's heard of Scope 3 emissions? Some. Scope 3 emissions are the emissions that come from an organization that are either upstream products and services in their supply chain or downstream products and services in their supply chain, which means that they have limited operational control and decision-making over what happens there because it doesn't happen within their facilities or within their owned assets. So after hearing, what can we do in Scope 3? What can we do in Scope 3? We went on a very long journey and in very many stakeholder consultations and in collaboration with BCG, created a bespoke concept that could address commercial transport because we realized that a lot of organizations have transportation, of course, sitting in their upstream and downstream supply chain, but because it's not an owned asset, they weren't addressing those emissions. A lot of times we say, well, it's not material for our organization, that's why we don't address it. We have 3PLs, we have leasing companies, or we have transport and logistics logistics services that offer this, but we don't actively engage with those organizations because it's not material for organization. But when we tallied up the potential that if we were to electrify or decarbonize all of that transportation within our membership, we actually could have a really big impact on the UAE's transport sector. Hence where Road to Zero came together. It was a collaborative platform created to be able to increase ambition in non-state actors with a focus on private sector to say, we need you to accelerate your electrification and decarbonization of your vehicles, not only in your owned assets, but in your lease assets and down and up your supply chain. And this was really exciting because it was something that, although we have members that are leading in decarbonization, was something that they had never really considered. And since then, we've seen a lot of organizations already start to engage with their leasing companies and meet the commitments that were set by Road to Zero. So essentially, Road to Zero is an enabling element and platform to help organizations align to these short and medium-term targets of scaling up zero electric vehicles. Of course, in the interim period, electric vehicles being the most cost-efficient or technology-ready, and scaling that up across all elements of their transportation in their fleets. And so what we want to send to the industry that might be sitting here is a real strong demand signal, and indicating that the commercial sector is ready to take this on, especially when it comes two-wheelers, light duty, medium duty, and such, and really indicate that this is coming, but also try to work together collaboratively to come and overcome some of the structural market policy barriers that may still exist in the market that is hindering private sector from taking up zero electric vehicles in the immediate term. And what we really want to do is build on 5 key areas that we kept hearing over our consultation. So the operational certainty. We heard a lot of operational uncertainty from our members. How do I implement this at scale? Charging infrastructure questions, driver behavior questions. How can I institute this in a way that's not going to disrupt my operations and continue to deliver high quality to my customers? We also want to build on the fact that we want to give that signal to demand to have lower cost of vehicles. We know prices are coming down, but we're still seeing a really important requirement from commercial sector if they're going to scale up EVs, a financial burden on them or the leasing companies that they use. So we want to really see those costs come down. We want to share insights on infrastructure. We know there's always the chicken and egg situation of if there's no infrastructure, then we can't have demand or supply, and vice versa. But we really want to come and challenge that and say there are still things that we can do and contribute to insights to identify what are the opportunities in infrastructure. We also want to support policy insights and really bridge that gap between the commercial sector and policy opportunities and really provide insights on how that can be overcome and leveraged. And of course, one of the key enablers to electric vehicle and electrification in general, we know is going to be the take-up of green electricity over time. As the grid decarbonizes, it'll also give the imperative for those that have decarbonization targets to also increase their electrification and take-up of zero-emission vehicles in their fleets because they'll have their own decarbonization objectives. But we know that we can't wait. Essentially, that hockey stick that we're looking for in electric vehicle increase and uptake needs to happen. We need to start piloting these vehicles now because we know that commercial entities have a lot of questions from their leadership, from their finance organizations, and themselves. So we really need to start bridging those gaps now, and this is essentially what Road to Zero aims to do. We launched at COP28, and it was a very successful launch. We were endorsed by the Ministry of Energy and Infrastructure for this project as a commercial platform that contributes to the green mobility strategy of the country, which is part of the demand-side management strategy for the ministry. But it also contributes to the net zero strategy. So very much working hand in hand with government to be able to drive this opportunistic area of commercial vehicle transportation in Scope 3 and in their supply chains to decarbonize rapidly. We know that the UAE's commercial transport makes up 10% of UAE emissions, and our goal is really to help bring those down. So we have 17 organizations that are now signed up to Road to Zero, and you can see that the fleets that they have vary very much. And I would say that the predominant trend that we see is a lot of them are leasing their fleets, and that also makes for a very particular conversation in terms of those who own their assets and who they lease their assets, or are using 3PLs or transport and logistics service providers. And so you see here a variety of signatories, from people movers to goods movers, from two-wheelers, light duty, trucks and vans, passenger vehicles, and different types of scopes of goods as well. And so what you'll see here and what we've learned actually over the last, 6 months that we've launched this, is that the particularities in terms of the structural barriers and market barriers that they're currently facing are quite different, but are quite similar in certain areas. So we're trying to find those areas of convergence between those and really scale that up. To date, we've actually seen at least 20% of the organizations who have signed on to implementing their pilots doing those, which is fantastic. We've seen organizations go from not even considering electrification in their fleets to actually already starting those pilots and getting the buy-in from their leadership and financial entities inside to agreeing to that, which is fantastic. Now the question will become those that have piloted, how will they scale and how will they overcome those early adopting barriers to achieving those? These are some pictures of some of the engagements that we've had. We have quarterly workshops and meetings with our signatories to understand more deeply how it is that we can contribute as a collaborative platform to validating some insights and how we can elevate those learnings to decision makers in the country and policymakers. I'll skip through this because I'm conscious a little bit of time. So talking about what we're going to do this year, we've just recently launched in 6 months and so far have seen that our commercial entities and signatories have seen some success, but of course there's more that needs to be done. We see that organizations are also still struggling. My colleague was telling me we have 1/3 of organizations that have already launched their pilots, 1/3 of organizations that are about to launch their pilots, but still 1/3 of organizations that are struggling to understand how they can overcome their internal barriers or external barriers to implementing pilots in their operational in their supply chain or their logistics. So really our aim this year is going to make sure that signatories are launching their pilots and then using those case studies to help others learn and leapfrog. We'll also be knowledge sharing. There's a lot of expertise that we have in our signatory base that can share learnings and inspire other organizations through business case studies, leadership or meetups where they have their leaders and CEOs meet to be able to share learnings and really try to activate others to use that information to leapfrog so that we're not, every organization is coming and having to do the same case study with the same ROI, with the same metrics to their leadership when that information exists. So we're really trying to pull together what resources and information and data and case studies exist for two-wheelers, light-duty vans, passengers, et cetera, in the commercial space. So really developing that knowledge repository and really trying to inform the wider public on what's happening. So by the end of the year, we'll be launching a report with all of these case studies, all these data points to also share with you so you can understand how this could be implemented in your commercial entity or how you could work with other commercial entities to get your objectives across the finish line. Thirdly, we've instituted 2 working groups. So what's fantastic is that we've seen members in the signatory base come together and define what it is that is needed across the ecosystem. Ecosystem information, supply information, charging infrastructure information, current policies, and they're actually coming together and developing this together. So if there is something that you would like to contribute to these lists that are going to help the commercial sector leapfrog, please let us know. We do have surveys and questionnaires that we send to the industry, the ecosystem players, to be able to gather this information and have a one-stop shop for our signatories. But again, we're only as good as the data that we have and that we bring to the table. So please reach out to myself. I have my colleague in the back, Nikitin, also reaching out to speak to suppliers, OEMs, and manufacturers. So these working groups are the collaborative action. These are the signatories coming together. Please support us if you can. And lastly is really the enabling EV environment. We're lucky to have also on our advisory committee for UACA, Her Excellency Razan Al-Mubarak, who is the COP28 high-level champion, as well as the IUCN president. We have representation from the Ministry of Climate Change, Environment Agency Abu Dhabi, and hopefully soon other entities. So what can we bring to light in terms of minimum efficiency standards that is coming from the private sector? What kinds of market solutions can we bring that could help others leapfrog? And these are the elements that we're planning to bring by the end of the year. Like I said, our working groups are really working hard on bridging the data gaps that exist for others to be able to accelerate that transition. This is what our working groups will be focused on. So this is the Road to Zero platform. We're 6 months in. We're quite excited about the potential for commercial electrification, but of course is really going to depend on the information that we can bring and how we can collaborate to overcome some of these barriers, but really build on the opportunities and the progress that we're seeing that's rapidly scaling across the UAE and the Emirates. So thank you. Please feel free to reach out if this is of interest interest to you, and thank you so much for having me. I think we have a couple minutes for questions, so I might just pause here and see if there's any reflections or comments. Otherwise, like I mentioned, I'll be here on the side if you have any questions, as well as my colleague Nikitin. We'd be pleased to take your questions and see how we can bridge the gap. Thank you. There's a question? Please, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Hanson, come from Canada. I was just wondering whether you guys have included hydrogen fuel cell electrification vehicles in your plan, in your Road 2.0.
So, I mean, for us, really what's most important is economic viability for the commercial sector. Right now, what we're seeing is that hydrogen, while it is coming online, it's not something that's currently in the grasp of commercial sector. So for heavy-duty vehicles, we're not seeing the economic viability or operational viability right now. What we're doubling down on is the technologies for the commercial sector that we're speaking to, two-wheelers, light-duty vehicles, vans, chilled, ambient, etc., getting that actually implemented in their pilots. If there is a technology that you believe that is commercially viable right now to be done in the commercial sector, I'd be open to hear it. Right now, we're doubling down on what we know has appetite and viability for implementation.
Okay, I will share with you.
Thank you. For us, I think the initiative is not going to be it's going to be technology agnostic. So of course, any technology that's coming that is proving to be something that can be implemented in a business, we will take up. Right now, the reason why we're focusing on electric vehicles purely is just the fact that we do feel that there is, total cost of ownership is coming to be more attractive for organizations. We're not really there yet, but still it's something that can be bought into from a leadership level once you add on other elements of decarbonization and targets and alignment to the UAE national agenda. But until we're able to really prove that other technologies can be implemented in that way, we'll stick to EVs, but our ambition is really to be as technology open as possible and just making sure that what we're putting together meets the objectives of the country in decarbonization and is at least somewhat viable from a commercial perspective. Thank you for the question. All right, thank you.